Emily watched as Lucas carefully moved the tiny train along its tracks, his small hands precise yet full of wonder. She felt a warmth in her chest, the kind that comes not from grand gestures but from quiet moments of connection. For a long time, she had believed that life's small joys were fleeting, easily overshadowed by work, responsibilities, and unspoken regrets. Yet here, in the middle of her living room, she realized that life still had a way of surprising her. The soft hum of the train wheels reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. The little coincidences that sometimes shaped life. Moments that seemed trivial at first, but carried far more meaning than she could ever imagine. Lucas paused, turning a corner with the train, and looked up at her. "Emily, do you think trains really can take us anywhere?" She smiled softly, feeling the question reach deeper than the child's innocent curiosity. "I think," she said slowly, "sometimes trains and people can take us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't realize it at the time." Her words hung in the air, and she felt the quiet stirrings of emotion she hadn't expected. Memories of the past of old friendships and distant connections seemed to blend with the present. As though fate itself had placed Lucas in her living room that afternoon, there was a strange, gentle magic in the way his presence felt. A reminder that life had a way of reconnecting people. Even when years had passed, Lucas reached for a tiny station and accidentally knocked over one of the buildings. He gasped, his eyes wide. "Oh no, I ruined it." Emily laughed softly, kneeling beside him to help set it upright. "No, you didn't," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Sometimes mistakes just lead to better things." As they worked together to rebuild the miniature city, Emily's mind wandered back to moments she had once thought lost. She remembered afternoons with her cousin Michael, the laughter they had shared over similar toy sets, the quiet understanding that had existed between them without needing to be spoken. Back then, life had pulled them apart. Distance, family responsibilities, and unspoken fears had separated them. Yet now, with Lucas sitting across from her, she realized that a new chance at connection had arrived in the most unexpected way. The doorbell rang suddenly, startling both of them. Emily frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Lucas, however, jumped to his feet, excitement replacing his earlier concentration. "Maybe it's a surprise," he said. Emily opened the door to see a delivery man holding a small package. "Package for Emily Clark," he said politely. She signed for it and closed the door, curiosity flickering in her chest. The box was small, neatly wrapped, and addressed in handwriting she recognized immediately. Michael's handwriting. Her heart skipped a beat. Michael. She hadn't seen him in nearly 15 years. Not since he had moved across the country. And yet, here he was, somehow reaching out. Bridging the years that had separated them, Emily set the package on the coffee table and carefully opened it. Inside was a single item, a miniature train painted bright red and gold, exactly like the one she had loved as a child. Alongside it was a note, simple yet profoundly moving. "Emily, I hope this reminds you that some connections never truly fade. Even when life pulls us apart, the heart remembers." Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes. She hadn't realized how deeply she had missed him. How much she had longed for a reminder that some parts of the past could still find their way into the present. And now, with Lucas beside her, the train felt even more alive. As though the three of them, the past, the present, and the promise of the future, were all connected in this single, quiet moment. Lucas reached for the new train and held it carefully. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice filled with awe. "Can we add it to the city?" Emily nodded, her hand brushing his as she helped him place it on the tracks. In that small contact, there was a gentle reminder that life had a way of connecting people, not through grand gestures or dramatic events, but through the quiet, meaningful moments that carried real emotion. She thought about the twists of fate that had led Michael to send this package, the coincidence that had brought Lucas into her living room, and the way small events could ignite emotions she hadn't felt in years. It was a reminder that life had its rhythms, its timing, and that sometimes the heart knew what it needed long before the mind did, as they continued to build the miniature city together. Emily realized that this afternoon marked a shift. The loneliness that had clung to her for so long was beginning to loosen, replaced by a sense of connection that was both tender and profound. The past was no longer a place of regrets, but a bridge leading to new possibilities that she could explore with care, warmth, and hope. For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future where joy and connection were not fleeting but present in the smallest moments. A shared laugh, a gentle touch of hands on a toy train, the unspoken understanding that even when life pulls people apart, meaningful bonds can always find their way back. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow across the living room, Emily felt a quiet thrill in her chest. Life, with its twists and surprises, had reminded her that hope, love, and connection were never truly lost. Sometimes all it took was one small moment, a child's laughter, a train rolling along its tracks, a simple note from someone who mattered to reignite the heart in ways that words could barely capture. In that present twist, Emily realized the past had returned not to haunt her, but to guide her forward. The late afternoon sunlight poured through the living room window, bathing Emily and Lucas in a warm, golden glow. The miniature train rolled steadily along the tracks, crossing bridges and weaving through tiny stations, but for Emily, the movement of the toy was secondary to the quiet turmoil stirring inside her. She watched Lucas place a small figure near the newly arrived train, his brow furrowed in concentration. In the way he worked, so carefully and thoughtfully, Emily saw echoes of her own past, the same focused intensity she had admired in Michael all those years ago. It brought back memories she had tucked away, memories of moments left unsaid, of emotions never spoken aloud. Her heart ached gently. She remembered the afternoons with Michael, how their hands had brushed over tiny trains and blocks, how a simple look had sometimes conveyed more than words ever could. Back then, she had wanted to say so much words of admiration, affection, even love, but life had held her back. Distance, fear, and timing had kept them apart, leaving an unspoken truth lingering quietly between them, a truth that had never been forgotten. Now, with Lucas beside her, she felt those old emotions return in a different shape, protective, tender, and quietly yearning. There was a longing in her heart, a gentle ache that had nothing to do with romance in the adult sense, but everything to do with human connection. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance, not with words, but with presence. Lucas looked up suddenly, his small face thoughtful. "Emily," he said softly, "why do you sometimes look sad when you play?" Emily blinked, surprised at the question. She hadn't realized how much of her inner feelings might show on her face. She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Sometimes," she said finally, "I think about people I miss, people I care about, who aren't here right now." Lucas nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "I get that. I miss my dad sometimes when he's away." Her chest tightened at his words. He understood in a way that cut straight to her heart. She wanted to tell him that sometimes she had missed Michael too, that a part of her had longed for the people who had been close to her once and then gone. Yet the words felt fragile, delicate, almost too heavy for the moment. She swallowed them, letting them remain unspoken. But the weight of their presence lingered between them. Emily reached over to adjust a small bridge on the train track, her fingers brushing Lucas's hand lightly. He didn't pull away, and that small, simple touch sent warmth through her that was equal parts comfort and longing. It reminded her that connection could exist even in silence, in shared moments without grand declarations. Sometimes, Emily continued softly, the people we care about, we don't get to tell them everything we feel, but that doesn't mean the feelings go away. Lucas's eyes widened a little, and he nodded, seeming to understand more than his age might suggest. "So, it's okay to feel it, even if you don't say it?" he asked. Emily smiled, the emotion in her chest swelling. "Yes, it's okay," she said gently. "Sometimes feeling is enough. Sometimes being with someone, even quietly, is what matters the most." A hush fell over the room. The train continued to move along its tracks, carrying its tiny passengers forward, but in the space between Emily and Lucas, something larger was happening, a quiet recognition of love in its purest, simplest form. It wasn't about romance or passion. It was about trust, care, and the longing to be seen and understood. Emily's thoughts drifted to Michael again. She thought of the package he had sent, the way it had stirred memories and emotions she thought she had buried. She realized that all those years her heart had carried a quiet truth, that some bonds never truly break. And now, watching Lucas play and smile, she understood that the past and present could coexist. The unspoken feelings of yesterday could find resonance today. Even in moments as simple as placing a tiny figure on a miniature train, the room seemed to hold its breath. The sunlight streamed softly through the curtains, casting gentle streaks of gold across the living room. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, her hands carefully moving a tiny train along its track. The clatter of wheels against the miniature rails was comforting, a small rhythm in the quiet of her apartment. For a moment, she let herself forget the world outside the bustling streets, the endless responsibilities, the quiet ache she often carried in her chest. Emily had always been the kind of person who felt things deeply. She noticed the little details, the way the sunlight hit the kitchen table, the scent of rain on the sidewalk, the soft hum of a neighbor's music drifting through an open window. But lately, the quiet she used to cherish had started to feel heavy, almost isolating. She had friends, yes, people who cared, but there were nights when even a crowded room felt empty. She longed for a connection she couldn't quite define, a feeling of being truly seen, understood, and accepted. Her apartment was neat, carefully organized, but even the order could not fill the gaps inside her. On the shelves behind her sat small reminders of the past, framed photographs of family gatherings, an old teddy bear from childhood, and a collection of tiny figurines she had collected over the years. Each object carried a memory, a whisper of happiness that had once felt abundant. Now, those memories were soft echoes, comforting but tinged with the sharp edge of nostalgia. The train set in front of her was her latest refuge. It was silly, maybe, to play with toys at 29, but Emily didn't care. There was something meditative about arranging the tracks, placing each little building in its perfect spot, and imagining a tiny world where nothing ever went wrong. In that miniature city, she was in control. In that miniature world, she could build joy carefully, piece by piece. As she placed a tiny station on the track, she sighed softly. "I wish life could be this simple," she murmured to herself. "Just a little train, a little track. No complications." Emily had spent years chasing a career in graphic design, a dream that had given her purpose but also demanded long hours and lonely nights. Friends had drifted away, relationships had faltered, and while she had loved deeply, she had also been hurt. The emotional bruises were subtle now, hidden beneath smiles and polite conversation, but they were there. And so, in the quiet afternoons, she returned to her miniature trains. A world where mistakes could be undone, where the right connections could always be made, and where hope, fragile as it was, could feel tangible. A soft knock at the door startled her. Emily froze, her heart skipping a beat. Visitors were rare. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to retreat into her little world of wheels and tracks. But another knock came, louder this time. Curiosity nudged her forward, and she rose slowly to open the door. And there he was, Lucas. Her nephew, all energy and bright eyes, holding a small backpack that seemed far too large for his tiny frame. "Hi, Emily," he exclaimed, his voice full of warmth and excitement. "Can I come in?" Emily blinked, momentarily speechless. He was unexpected, sudden, a burst of life into her quiet apartment. There was something about the way he smiled, completely unself-conscious, that made her chest ache with a tender, unexplainable emotion. It had been so long since someone had looked at her and simply brought joy without asking for anything in return. "Of course," she said softly, stepping aside to let him in. Her voice sounded lighter than she had anticipated. Though a small spark of hope had flared in her chest, Lucas dropped his backpack by the door and immediately crouched down near the train set. His eyes widened with curiosity. "I didn't know you still played with this," he said, reaching out to touch one of the miniature buildings. Emily smiled, a mix of amusement and warmth tugging at her lips. "I do. Sometimes it's nice to play. To imagine things just the way you want them," she replied. Her words were simple, but the weight behind them was not lost on her. For years, she had hidden her longing for connection behind polite smiles, behind work, behind distractions. Yet here was Lucas, innocent and unassuming, unknowingly offering her a bridge back to a world where joy could be simple and unguarded. For a moment, Emily allowed herself to simply watch him. He was so full of life, so honest in his excitement, that it was contagious. She felt a flutter of emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected visit was the start of something gentle and meaningful. A reminder that life could still surprise her with moments of pure, unassuming happiness. As Lucas carefully placed a tiny figure on the train, Emily leaned back against the wall, taking in the sight. There was laughter in his eyes, curiosity in his fingers, and something warm beginning to settle in her heart. She realized that sometimes the most profound connections came not from grand gestures, but from quiet, shared moments, the kind that could begin on a living room floor with a toy train and a small spit, and a small, unexpected visitor. And in that quiet, golden afternoon, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in years. A sparkly watched Lucas carefully place the tiny train on the tracks, his small fingers trembling slightly with excitement. There was a focused intensity in the way he handled the pieces, a seriousness that made her smile. She remembered her own childhood days playing on the floor with her older brother and cousins, building cities and imagining adventures that stretched far beyond the walls of her home. "Lucas," Emily began softly, "do you know why I love these toys so much?" Lucas looked up, his wide eyes reflecting curiosity. "Why?" Emily chuckled quietly, a soft warmth spreading in her chest. "When I was your age, I used to play with my cousins just like this. We'd spend hours building train stations, little towns, pretending that the world was exactly how we wanted it. It was a place where nothing bad could happen and everything made sense." Lucas tilted his head as if pondering her words. "Did you have a favorite train?" he asked, his voice small but earnest. "Yes," Emily said, smiling. "It was bright red, like this one," she added, pointing to the miniature engine in front of her. "And I remember I always wished I could go anywhere I wanted, see all the places the train could take me." As she spoke, memories began to surface like delicate waves brushing against the shore. She remembered the laughter of her cousin Michael, who had lived across the street. The way they would race to see who could build the tallest building with blocks, their hands brushing accidentally and then quickly withdrawing. A shy acknowledgement of closeness that neither fully understood. Back then, she had felt something quietly special for him. A mix of admiration, fascination, and the tender pangs of first affection. Life, ever, had a way of pulling people apart. Michael had moved to another city when Emily was 13. And though they wrote letters at first, the correspondence slowly dwindled. She had grown up, life had grown complicated, and that small magical connection had slipped into memory. Yet, now with Lucas before her, the same spark of connection that had once existed seemed to whisper in her heart. Lucas adjusted a tiny figure on the train, his tongue peeking slightly from the corner of his mouth as he concentrated. "I like trains," he said simply. "They go places." Emily's smile softened. "Yes, they do. And sometimes they remind us of people we care about, people we've missed." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "You know, your dad and I used to play with these same trains when we were little, before life got complicated." Lucas's eyes widened with surprise. "Really?" "Really," Emily nodded. "And just like the trains, sometimes life takes us in directions we don't expect. But even if we're apart for a while, the memories stay with us. And sometimes they come back when we least expect them." Her voice trembled slightly, though she didn't notice. She had spent years carrying that quiet ache, the kind of longing that stems from missed opportunities and unspoken feelings. Now, watching Lucas play, she realized that some of that old hurt was easing, replaced by a gentle warmth, a soft connection that transcended time. Lucas paused, turning a small building so it fit perfectly on the track. "I like being here with you," he said suddenly. "It's fun." Emily's chest tightened, a bittersweet ache mingling with her joy. "I like it too, Lucas," she said softly. "More than you know." In that moment, Emily felt the fragile thread of family and connection stretching between them. She remembered the afternoons she had spent with Michael and her cousins. The tiny triumphs of building a city together, the quiet moments of understanding that didn't need words. Now with Lucas, it felt as though that thread had been extended, a gentle bridge linking past and present, old memories and new joys. Yet even as warmth spread in her heart, a shadow of melancholy lingered. Life had its ways of separating people, distance, misunderstandings, unspoken fears, and Emily had learned that the heart's desires were not always easily fulfilled. She had hoped all these years that some moments of magic might return. And now, sitting on the floor with Lucas, she realized that maybe the heart didn't need grand gestures to heal it, only needed small, sincere connections. Moments of presence that reminded her of love's quiet power. The afternoon light softened further, painting golden streaks across the room. Emily reached over to adjust a building Lucas had set slightly off track, their fingers brushing lightly. A shiver of recognition went through her, not the kind tied to romance, but the kind tied to pure human glow. The late afternoon sun had softened into a gentle amber, spilling through the window and catching the edges of Emily's miniature train city. Every corner of the tiny world she and Lucas had built seemed to glow in the quiet warmth of the room. The trains chugged along the tracks, bridges held firm, and buildings stood tall. But Emily's heart was racing in a way that no toy or memory could fix. Lucas had grown quieter over the last hour, focusing intently on adding the last details to the city. Emily watched him, her gaze soft, and something within her stirred. She realized, with a surprising clarity, that the emotions she had held quietly for years, the longing, the hope, the small ache of what might have been, were no longer able to remain hidden. They pressed against her chest, demanding acknowledgement, even if only in her own heart. "Lucas," Emily began softly, her voice breaking the gentle hum of the train wheels. "Can I tell you something?" Lucas looked up, his eyes bright and trusting. "Of course, Emily," he said, small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Emily took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. Sometimes we hold feelings inside us for a long time, feelings we don't know how to share. "I've carried some of those for many years," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "And today, seeing you, being with you, it makes me realize that it's okay to speak what's in my heart." Lucas tilted his head, listening intently. Emily felt a swell of emotion, a mix of fear and hope. Fear that speaking aloud might change the quiet, fragile connection they had, and hope that it might bring a sense of closeness, honesty, and understanding. "You know," she continued, "there are people in my life I've missed, people I've cared for deeply. Sometimes I think about them every single day, even when life moves on. And sometimes the feelings don't go away, they just wait quietly for the right moment." Lucas's small hand rested on the edge of the train track. He nodded thoughtfully. "Like when I miss Dad when he's at work?" he asked softly. Emily smiled, her chest tightening. "Exactly, Lucas, just like that. You understand more than you think." She paused, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then, with a courage she hadn't expected to find in herself, she whispered words she had never spoken aloud before. Words that carried years of longing and unspoken hope. "There was someone I cared for a very long time. Someone who was important to me. I never got the chance to tell him how I felt, and for years I thought that chapter of my life was closed. But today, with you here and with this little reminder of him," she said, Glancing at the bright red train Michael had sent, I realized that sometimes feelings never truly disappear. They just wait for a moment like this, to be felt again. Lucas looked up at her with wide, understanding eyes. Emily, you mean, it's okay to feel it even now? Emily nodded, her voice soft and warm. Yes, Lucas, it's more than okay. It's human. And it's what makes us who we are. Feeling deeply, caring for someone, even if it's been years. It's part of life's magic, for the first time in what felt like forever. Emily allowed herself to fully embrace the emotion she had carried silently for so long. She felt a gentle tear slip down her cheek. But it was not sorrow, it was release, relief, acceptance, a recognition that her heart could hold both the past and the present, and that doing so didn't diminish either. Lucas reached for the new train again, carefully placing it on the track. I think it's perfect here, he said, his small voice full of quiet certainty. Just like everything else. Emily smiled through the warmth in her chest. She realized that in sharing her unspoken truth, she had not only unburdened herself, but she had strengthened the bond between her and Lucas. The trust, the quiet affection, the shared understanding, it had all deepened, richer and more meaningful than ever before. She leaned back, letting the weight of the day settle into a gentle peace. For the first time, she felt the kind of hope that didn't depend on circumstance or chance. It existed in the quiet knowledge that the heart, when brave enough to speak, could heal, connect, and rediscover joy. Thank you, Lucas, she said softly, her voice almost a whisper, for being here today, for reminding me what it feels like to truly connect with someone. Lucas smiled, his eyes shining. I'm glad I came, he said simply. The train continued its steady journey along the tracks, moving forward as if to echo the turning point Emily had reached. The miniature bridges they had built together seemed stronger, the buildings taller, and the tiny city complete in a way that mirrored her own emotional journey. She realized that truth, once spoken even in the gentlest, quietest way, had the power to transform a heart, to clear space for hope and love, and to bring meaning to even the simplest of moments. As the sun dipped lower, painting the room in shades of gold and soft pink, Emily felt the extraordinary within the ordinary. The small living room, the toy train, the laughter and presence of her nephew, all of it had become the setting for an emotional revelation she would carry forever in speaking her truth. Emily had taken the first step toward healing, toward reclaiming joy, and toward embracing the love and connection that life could still offer. And as she watched Lucas's bright eyes follow the train along the tracks, she understood something profoundly simple. Sometimes, the turning point isn't a dramatic event. It's a quiet. The evening settled gently over the city, casting long shadows and bathing Emily's apartment in a soft golden glow. The miniature train had come to a rest on its tracks, but the sense of movement it had carried lingered in the room, the subtle rhythm of connection, memory, and hope. Emily sat on the floor beside Lucas, watching him arrange the final touches on the tiny buildings. There was a quiet pride in her heart as she observed his careful attention, the way he handled each piece with care and imagination. She thought of all the afternoons she had spent alone, the quiet longing that had weighed on her heart, and how unexpectedly life had offered her a gift, a moment of genuine, unspoken understanding, shared with someone who mattered deeply. Lucas looked up at her with wide eyes. Emily, I like our city. It's happy. Emily smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. It is happy, she agreed. And do you know why? Lucas tilted his head. Why? Because we built it together, Emily said softly. Every little piece, every building, every track, it all matters. And it matters even more because we were here together sharing it. Lucas beamed, and Emily felt the warmth in her chest deepen. There was something profoundly simple, yet extraordinary, about the way life sometimes offered closure, not with grand events or dramatic declarations, but through quiet, heartfelt moments of connection. Emily's thoughts drifted to the package Michael had sent. and to the emotions she had finally spoken aloud earlier in the day. The unspoken truths, the lingering memories, the years of longing, they all felt lighter now. Not because the past had changed, but because she had faced it, acknowledged it, and allowed it to coexist with the present. There was a gentle freedom in that recognition, a sense of peace that she had not felt in a long time. Lucas picked up a tiny figure and placed it on the platform, small hands steady. "Do you think he would like it?" he asked softly, pointing to the bright red train Michael had sent. Emily nodded, her heart swelling. "I think he would," she said. "And even if he couldn't be here with us today, this little train reminds us that connections don't disappear, no matter how much time passes. Some things, some people, they stay in our hearts and they show up in the most unexpected ways." Lucas's eyes lit up with understanding. "Like us?" he asked quietly. Emily reached out, lightly holding his hand. "Yes, like us," she said, her voice gentle. The warmth of the moment was simple, honest, and profound, a reminder that the bonds we cherish can exist in many forms, carrying love, trust, and hope, even across years and distance. The room fell into a quiet calm. The trains were still, the miniature city complete. And yet the emotional journey was far from over. It had only reached a different kind of completion. Emily understood now that life's resolutions were not always dramatic. Sometimes they were soft, subtle, and infinitely meaningful. She glanced at Lucas and felt a gentle reassurance wash over her. The loneliness that had once lingered like a shadow was now replaced by connection, by shared presence and understanding. It was not a temporary relief, was a reminder that joy could be cultivated. That love in all its forms, familial, platonic, even the tender echoes of past affection, could be present, alive and fulfilling. Emily's gaze wandered to the window, where the city lights were beginning to twinkle, each one a tiny reminder of the vast possibilities that life held. She realized that the day had been a turning point, not because the past had changed, nor because her longing had vanished, but because she had allowed herself to embrace it fully, and in doing so, had opened her heart to the present. Lucas, sensing the calm, leaned against her shoulder slightly, tired but content. "Can we play again tomorrow?" he asked softly. Emily smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. "Yes, we can," she said. "Tomorrow we'll make the city even bigger, and maybe we'll even add new friends to it." The words were simple, yet they carried profound meaning. Life, like their miniature city, was built one piece at a time with care, patience, and love. Each day offered an opportunity to rebuild, to reconnect, and to create joy, no matter how small or ordinary the moment might